From the Delhi studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on The Debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Ukraine war has catalyzed a change in the world order. And India is taking center stage increasingly last few days and weeks. From the US to UK to Russia now, world leaders are all rushing to New Delhi as the war continues in Ukraine. India can no longer stay completely away, but importantly, India can also no longer be ignored. Here's why, and then we debate.
The conflict in Ukraine has expedited the change in the global order.
Формируется новая реальность, когда однополярный мир безвозвратно уходит в прошлое, и когда складывается многополярная реальность принципа суверенное равенство государств. Никто на этой земле не должен рассматриваться как второстепенный игрок. Все равны и все суверенны.
India's key role has been that of a patient listener, listening to both the sides, to play the neutral role of a silent observer, a counsel, communicating to both the sides. Remember, Prime Minister Modi has spoken to both President Putin and President Zelensky, and of course, in the process, to make sure that international rule of law is not flouted further, that there is ceasefire at the earliest, and that both the sides come back to the negotiating table.
The Prime Minister of India has been extremely cognizant of the change underway.
पिछले कुछ सप्ताहों के यूरोप के डेवलपमेंट्स ने अंतर्राष्ट्रीय व्यवस्था के स्थायित्व पर प्रश्न चिन्ह खड़ा हो गया है। इस संदर्भ में बिम्स्टेक क्षेत्रीय सहयोग को और सक्रिय बनाना महत्वपूर्ण हो गया है। हमारी क्षेत्रीय सुरक्षा को अधिक प्राथमिकता देना भी अनिवार्य हो गया है।
And India is already playing a key role regionally, whether it is by coming to the aid of Sri Lanka that is entangled in a Chinese debt trap.
We had mentioned there was a 400 million currency swap under the SARC format. RBI deferred, I think it was called Asian Clearing Union, Asian Clearing Union facility. There was a 515.2 million settlement facility that has been deferred till May. We have also earlier extended a $500 million line of credit for procurement of fuel from India. In addition, I think we supplied 40,000 metric tons of diesel, etc. So I wanted to emphasize that India has always stood with the people of Sri Lanka, and we will continue to extend all possible support at this juncture. And I think we are cognizant of the economic difficulties that the country is facing, and this is part of that.
Or it be leading the security pillar of BIMSTEC nations.
Henceforth, BIMSTEC cooperation activities will take place in 7 pillars. Each pillar will be led by one of the member states who will be primarily responsible for furthering cooperation. In that reorganization, it was decided that India will lead the security pillar.
In a testimony to India's ability to balance interests, India is hosting both Britain's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov simultaneously. Russia is cracking down on the Western Bloc in a counter-move, but India is not going to become a pawn in the Russia versus USA fight. India will participate in the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June.
Today I signed a decree that establishes rules on selling Russian natural gas with the so-called unfriendly states. We suggest to the contractors from such countries a transparent and easy to understand system to buy Russian natural gas. They have to open a ruble account in Russian banks. These accounts will be used to pay for the gas that will be supplied starting from tomorrow, starting from April 1st.
Even America, that is acting tough, recognizes this.
Proof of our non-alignment that the West thinks that we should pull back from Russia and the Russians think perhaps we could have done more. What are the options that are available to us? In a sense, India first is the option that has been exercised by the Modi government, be it buying some distressed cargoes of petroleum that were selling cheaper because of the embargoes on Russian trade, or to make sure that every Indian is evacuated to safety out of Ukraine, or to prevail upon the West to not provoke the Russians further. Speaking to both President Zelensky and President Putin, I think India has exercised the option of India first.
Let's debate.
Subject has come up so often of late, and there is so much growing controversy over it and strong views on India's role, what India should be doing. I thought we'll have a full focused discussion on this. And with us once again is Dov Zakheim, former Undersecretary of Defense in the George W. Bush administration and currently Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. We have Dan Smith, Director of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute from Stockholm in Sweden, and Michael Allen is with us tonight, and he is a former Special Assistant to President Bush for Non-Proliferation. He's worked on the Indo-US civilian nuclear deal. And we have Ivan Ereguin Toft. He's Director of the International Relations Concentration, Brown University. He's a lecturer in international public affairs, joining us from Cambridge in Massachusetts. Malgorzata Monikowska is president of the Center for International Relations in Poland. She's on the top right of your screen. Michael Clare is senior visiting fellow of the Arms Control Association. He's there on the bottom left, second screen. And we have Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. He is historian, analyst, and author specializing in Russia and the former USSR. He's joining us live from London. And he's right there in the box below me. And then next to him is Dr. Helin Sari Ertem, professor at Istanbul Medeniyet University from Istanbul. And the Indian side is represented by Abhijit Iyer Mitra, and writer and defense expert, and Professor Madhav Nalapat, strategic analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. I want to open up this discussion. And Dov, I think the Americans should stop being so rude and stop being so pompous. You know, we had this junior official from the US. His name is Dalip Singh. I think he's one of your deputy NSA's middle-ranking official, who comes to New Delhi and tries to lecture New Delhi. And he says to India, you will have consequences. He says to India, Abhishek, he says there's going to be consequences to countries that actively attempt to circumvent or backfill these sanctions. What consequences are we to expect, Dov, you think?
Well, you know, I can't speak for the government. I can tell you that people who feel strongly about it feel that those who are breaking the sanctions will in some way themselves be economically penalized. Now, does that mean it'll happen? Does that mean how it'll happen? I really don't know. And I know that India has been, and we've talked about this on this program, has been very forceful about not taking sides, about not breaking relations with the Russians or with us. One thing I would suggest, though, is that if India wants to really have credibility as a mediator, a country with the 5th largest gross domestic product in the world could probably provide more humanitarian assistance than it's doing. Compare yourselves to Korea, compare yourselves to Japan. They're doing literally 10 times, maybe even more than 10 times more in terms of humanitarian aid. But in terms of sanctioning India, I don't know what this particular official was saying. He's relatively senior, actually, because he's a deputy national security advisor. But I personally have never believed in threats. They tend not to work very well.
Yeah, and also, are the Germans backfilling sanctions when they say that they are ready to pay in rubles? I mean, everyone is taking care of the national interest. Every other Eastern European nation has been saying that they can't stop taking Russian energy immediately. They'll take time.
Which is a fascinating point you make there, Abhishek, because I want to put that to Michael Allen. Michael Allen, this whole definition that America is going to go really tough on countries that backfill sanctions. What amounts to backfilling sanctions? And who defines who's backfilling sanctions?
I think the administration will lobby, of course, India and Germany and other Western European nations who go out of their way to look for economic opportunity, if that's the right way to put it, in buying Russian oil at a discount. And so I don't think they are expressly threatening sanctions on India. We have a terrific bilateral relationship that's growing, and India is very popular in the United States across Republican and Democrats in the Hill and, of course, around Washington, D.C. I think he's just saying generally that India's terrific reputation and in the world, and is one of the greatest countries in the world and the largest democracy, may suffer some consequences if it's seen as being too much on Vladimir Putin's side. After all, Vladimir Putin is targeting civilians. He is using thermobaric weapons and white phosphorus. And as great a country as India, we don't think, as we see it here, would want to be seen as a party to someone who very well could get referred to The Hague as a war criminal in coming months.
I don't know, but I don't know. I somehow begin to feel that, and I'd like to go to Ivan Toft also. I just begin to worry that America is perhaps losing its sense of reality. Every country looks out for itself, and the more these kind of threats, it's going to really hurt American long-term interests. You need India, and I don't know, Ivan, is this? I mean, it's suicidal at this point of time, Mr. Ivan Toft. I would say, when America should be seeking more support to go around wagging their finger at countries, especially large and significant countries like India. This kind of threat that's gone from America, it's not going to help. I mean, eventually India may go in for the rupee-ruble payment system, for example. You know, we may go up for the rupee-ruble payment system.
The Germans are doing it.
Yeah, so I mean, if it helps us. It works for our people, and I see no reason why we shouldn't go there. Can you present a contrary argument, please, why India should not?
I'm not sure I can. I would say that I think the point you made earlier is the most important point, which is that states tend to look out for their own interests first, and they define their interests in different ways. The question isn't whether India will experience consequences from not doing more to enforce the sanctions that have been applied. The question is whether those consequences, however they are, outweigh India's broader interests in maintaining friendships with Russia. I mean, India needs Russia diplomatically as a counterweight to its emerging nemesis, which is the People's Republic of China. And it's also still remains highly dependent on Russia for its weapons industry, spare parts, upgrades, the kinds of things for its national defense. So those are real interests that India has to take into account. And I actually think that going back to the non-aligned movement, India's right. It's in a pivotal position now. I have been one of those that think that one thing that India and Russia share is a bit of excessive discounting in international fora, in the sense that I wouldn't go so far as to say India has been ignored. But I will say that it hasn't been given the consideration it deserves. And I think Russia, in the decade leading up to the current crisis, was largely or overlooked and discounted as well. So they both share that. As to the United States and its efforts to impose these sanctions, it's not personal to India. it's the hope, and it's only a hope, that the threat of sanctions and the pain that will be forthcoming will give Russia a counterweight to its narrower interests in Ukraine and make it rethink its ambitions. And that's all I would say. And you know, this is a horrific conflict. The point that was raised earlier about Russia fighting the war the way it's fighting it,
no doubt,
is a real point for both India and for the United States in terms of against. And then I just mentioned lastly, non-aligned and being neutral for India is still relatively difficult because at root, Putin's complaint in Ukraine is very similar to a problem that India has, which is border disputes with China. Both sides claim sovereignty in these areas. So India has as a counterweight to its efforts to remain powerful, recognized, and neutral, the problem of the precedents that might be set.
But even if I can just come in on the China point which you made there, Abhishek actually wanted to respond to you. Abhishek, you want to make the point to him, but because this point is made repeatedly that India needs American help, or India needs Russian help as a counterweight to China. Our own view, Mr. Toft, Professor Toft, is that we have been taking care of that entirely by ourselves, including when we were in a fairly serious skirmish, armed skirmish, face-to-face fight with the Chinese in Galwan. We dealt with it. We had casualties. We delivered a really bloody nose to the Chinese. Yes. And we're sorting it out bilaterally. This assumption that India somehow needs the Russians or the Americans to sort out the issues with the Chinese is completely misplaced. If you see the rate at which India's defense infrastructure is being built, we are arming ourselves to be the only country with a border like that with China, which is actually dealing with it.
We have sent a clear message that we can stand up to China. But more importantly, because you use the word nemesis for China vis-a-vis India. Remember, in the long term, China is going to be nemesis of the United States.
Correct.
By your actions over the last few months, you have put Russia firmly in the lap of China. Has that been a smart move by the Americans? That's the question.
That's a good point. Maybe Mr. Toft would like to take that.
Well, I'd like to add one more thing.
I don't want to be remembered as having said that as extremely as you characterized it. So that's not what I meant. I'm just meaning it's smart. The United States is smart to consider Russia as an ally against China and India as an ally against China. Again, all of us are following our interests, and it's a balancing act. It's not a question of a claim that India can't defend itself. India is obviously a tremendously effective, and it has been on its own in many cases when I think it shouldn't have been. But that said, I did not mean to suggest, and I would actually reject that suggestion that I'm claiming India is somehow helpless or entirely dependent on Russia. Nothing of the kind. It's just that when you think of counterweights, when you think of long-term rather than short-term issues, it's helpful to have these kinds of counterweights and to keep your options open. And maybe India is doing a better job of that, of thinking long-term, than the United States is in this particular case. So
I think we're doing that, and I think we're doing that actually. And if I may say so, as a proud Indian citizen to you, Professor Toft, as an Indian, am enjoying this. I mean, I am truly, and Professor Madhav Nalapat is a very, very distinguished strategic affairs expert from India. I am truly enjoying this, Professor Madhav Nalapat, that we, in our defense policy, in our global affairs, are just looking out for ourselves. But he wanted to make another point. It's not purely rhetorical. The point that Professor Madhav Nalapat is probably, if I can read his mind, going to come into is who all will the America sanction? Will America sanction Germany, for example? America should start, Madhav Nalapat, by sanctioning Germany, because Russian crude accounts for 14% of the intake at Germany's largest refinery, Miro. They should start by sanctioning Germany instead of wagging the finger at India. Professor Nalapat, please. Yes.
Arnab, they should start by sanctioning China, which has admittedly committed armed and unprovoked aggression against India. The way they have sanctioned Russia for its own actions on Ukraine, and they have not done that to India. Are we a lesser country than Ukraine for some reason? To the West? I don't know. And I want to ask a simple question. Somebody was talking about South Korea and Japan. Probably he's not aware. He's probably not traveled in India. We don't have the per capita income of South Korea or Japan. we have a slightly different per capita income. And this is something that that gentleman doesn't seem to know as yet. Well, I'd like to tell him, come and find out yourself. Look, I want to say, what are these consequences, Arnab? The consequences of obeying President Biden, who I thought he had gone back 30 years. He seems to have gone back 100 years. But the consequences will be mass starvation because we're not able to buy urea, we're not able to buy fertilizer, mass inflation because we'll have to buy oil at very inflated prices. And this is these are the consequences if we're not allowed to trade normally as we trade with all our trading partners, including the United States, including Russia. Does he want Indians to suffer and starve? Does it? I mean, a lot of the world is going to starve thanks to these sanctions on Russia. Russia and Ukraine, the breadbasket has been taken away from so many people. Wheat prices are going to rise. So much of the world economy is being damaged, including, may I say, when Putin turns off the tap tomorrow, the economies of Germany, of Italy, and a lot of European countries, unless they buy rubles. Why are you doing all this? What are you getting out of doing all this?
Well, I want to put that to Dan Smith on the specific point of sanctions. I want your thoughts on this, because my own view is that maybe it would be more advisable for the Americans to start by sanctioning Greece, right? Or maybe sanctioning Italy, or maybe sanctioning the Dutch. Let me start with the Dutch. I think the Americans should sanction the Dutch, because the Dutch refinery, 45% of that is owned by Russia's Lukoil. It declined to comment on whether it is using Russian crude oil. The Dutch are living off Russian oil. Italy's largest refinery, owned by Lukoil-controlled Swiss-based Litasco SA, processes only massive amounts of Russian crude. So Greece, Italy, the Dutch, and Germany, they're the ones, maybe because America has close relationships with them, maybe a sanction or two there would help, don't you think, Mr. Smith, instead of, insisting that India should fall in line?
I think that if the Deputy National Security Council advisor who made this comment that there would be consequences for India, I think if he were listening now, he would understand that he made a diplomatic faux pas and he shouldn't have said it. It's not helpful, and this discussion actually isn't helpful. The sanctions are aimed against Russia, and you talk about the food crisis in the world. It's very true that there will be a big impact, and a negative one, on food security, probably in the coming, in this year even, and certainly as later on in this year and into next. But the thing is that the Ukrainian contribution to world food supplies is being destroyed by Russian artillery and missiles and the war that has broken the UN Charter and also broke the security assurances that Russia itself gave to Ukraine when it gave up nuclear weapons nearly 30 years ago. The Russian contribution to world food supplies is being held back by the sanctions. Russia has the freedom of maneuver to say, okay, so we're stopping this war. We're getting nothing out of it. And therefore, we go back to our starting blocks. We probably get an agreement from Ukraine that it will accept that it is not entering NATO anytime soon or ever. There can probably be an agreement that there will be no long-term basing of NATO forces in Ukraine, because NATO tends not to do that in militarily non-aligned nations in Europe. And there you go. There is an agreement to be had there. All that is needed is for Russia to stop a war in which not only is it illegal from the way it started, but it's also, as has already been mentioned, being pursued in ways which are really quite inhumane, with direct attacks on civilian targets, direct attacks on hospitals, use of white phosphorus, and use of I think it's a very well-named bomb, the thermobaric bomb, because it comes so close to the word barbaric. I think the emphasis is to stop the war The foreign minister of Russia is now in Delhi, and I hope that the Indian government will be saying to him very firmly, it is time for you to come to an agreement and to stop this war.
Yeah, but there is another way as well, Dan, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's efforts must be bent towards stopping this war. At the moment, the war is not the greatest...
but there's...
Sorry. Please, go on.
No, you were talking about food security. Sorry to intervene. I was just saying to you that there is another way as well, Mr. Smith, and that would be for America to stop instigating, the war to continue into another week and another week by carrying out a proxy operation, by sending in mercenaries, calling them Ukrainian independence fighters, by getting foreign mercenaries paid £3,000 or $3,000 a day, pumping that all into Ukraine by sending more arms, when you know that prolonging the war is going to endanger not just the food security of the entire world, or at least a large part of it, but also, is going to cost hundreds and thousands of Ukrainian lives. Why is that way not being looked at at any point of time? And I find it ironical that while America will not do that and the West will not do that, they would question how much humanitarian aid India is sending to the people of Ukraine. Well, we have sent about 100 tons of humanitarian aid already, without needing anyone's encouragement for it. But who's causing the war? I think equally now it's a 50-50 situation. I truly think so.
So
Russia started the war. Russia's carrying on the war, but it's also being instigated from the other side.
Which Ukrainian missile has landed on which Russian city? Which Russian civilian target has been attacked by Ukraine? On what day did Ukraine breach the United Nations Charter by invading Russia? I mean, we can talk about and agree, I think. I would be myself very critical.
We'll talk about it.
About
Dan, can I respond to you? Can I respond to you? Since you asked the question, since you asked that question,
information with the facts.
No, I take your point. Since you asked that question, which presumably, and also the way you phrased it, was a rhetorical question, my response to you very simply is, and Michael, I think, wants to come into the debate, my response to you is, that's not the appropriate counter. My response to you would simply be this, that on multiple occasions, Zelensky has himself said that I don't want to be into NATO. I don't want anything to do with NATO, right? So the NATO issue is the only issue. And please don't tell me that the Americans do not have any significant influence over Zelensky to tell him to put that in writing. You are stalling the inevitable. Unless you truly believe that the Ukrainian army will win this battle, you can continue to make it what will be a very difficult insurgency for the Russians for an interminable period of time. In which case, my fear would be, Michael, that in the course of trying to score a largest geostrategic victory over Russia, which the Americans really want to score a geostrategic victory over Russia, you will turn Ukraine into another Afghanistan. Or maybe worse. I'd like to get a view from Michael on that. Yes, Michael. Michael Clare.
This is the wrong frame. Let me just say.
Let me say some words about this. And that is, you keep talking about Biden as responsible for the sanctions. But you have to understand that he has the support of Congress and the American people who watch the images that you're showing on the screen right now of Russian artillery striking Ukrainian cities, causing damage to civilian facilities, as Dan Smith just explained, hospitals and schools where civilians are perishing. We see 4 million refugees fleeing the country because of the bombardment, and the American people want stronger sanctions. So you have to understand that we in the United States view Russia as a barbaric country, as an outlaw country, as a pariah. So there's strong support for sanctions. And the longer this goes on, Russia is going to be a failed state as a consequence of its outlaw behavior. So the sooner that India tells Russia to stop the fighting and stop the shelling of civilians, the sooner Russia can recover and then India could have good relations with Russia.
Okay. No, okay, so I just, one small point. Abhijit, I know you're dying to come straight into this. I just want to make a limited point with the greatest of respect to you. You are a very senior person, Michael Clare, and all of you are people of tremendous experience and erudition. I truly think that it is time for everyone in the American bloc to get a realistic sense of the impact of sanctions. Believe me, the Iranian economy is doing very well. America needs to think, after all these years of calling the axis of evil and sanctions, why is the Iranian economy growing? What does it really prove? What is the story it tells? It does not even work on small countries like Iran. And it will not have any impact. And therefore, I thought that the finger wagging in New Delhi was...
Yeah, I'm opposed to sanctions because they impact ordinary people, not just the leaders in power. But, you know, the alternative in many cases is war, is military action. And I oppose that even more. So if this had been a NATO country that Russia attacked, we would be at World War III and we would have a nuclear conflict. So all I'm saying is the sooner that Russia stops attacking civilian facilities and begins true negotiations, then the world can be reknit again. It could come together again. It would be for the benefit of everyone. But Russia has to stop shelling these civilian cities.
Okay, so here's a situation, Abhijit, and Dr. Helen. I think the basic contradiction that we are finding here is that the West considers India's position to be extremely curious. We are a member of the Quad. We are going to be, I think in the next term, we'll be the leaders of the G20. We'll be holding the chair. We are also one of America's, if not America's, one of America's biggest trading partners. But we are also, and we've just announced, this was breaking news that just came in, Dr. Helen, that India will participate in June in Russia's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And I think what is happening here is that the world does not know how to deal with India, a very significant country that continues to do business with the Western Bloc, with America, continue to support America strategically on various options, but still says, no, we want to choose our mode of payment with Russia. We may go in for rupee-ruble trade. We will be at St. Petersburg. We will be at that economic forum. And I think that's the reason why all the, Liz Truss and Lavrov and all are rushing to Delhi. How do you think we should handle it? Abhijit, you want to take that? How should we handle it?
Yeah. Look, I think there's...
okay. Dr. Helen wants to go first. Yes, Dr. Helen from Istanbul first. Abhijit, you can come in right after. Yes, please.
Okay. If you don't mind, please. Well, actually, what I felt out of this 20 minutes discussion since it started, I felt that the Third World War has already started here on this TV channel. So I was a bit, wow, what's the tension about? So I can understand that you are excited about India's position, but be sure that we are all excited about all our countries' position in this humanitarian crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis going on in Ukraine. So at the moment, you mentioned that the world doesn't know how to handle India. Actually, in my point of view, it's not the world, but the United States, and it doesn't know how to handle with many actors, not only India. Turkey is included in that. Many Atlantic partners are also included in that. So Biden administration, as well as Trump administration, or we can tell about the Obama administration as well. The recent administrations, we can say, are not very determined about how to continue in future regarding having an American grand strategy, I'm thinking. So America hasn't got a clear grand strategy about the coming years. So we are all suffering from that. India, Turkey, or whatever other country. So we should put that aside, first of all. The other thing is that, India is very significant. It's a rising country, rising economy. We are expecting it to be the second largest economy in 2050. But at the same time, even it's materially or symbolically, what India does is very important at the moment. So I am one of the scholars who are talking about what India or China will take as a position regarding the Ukraine crisis. So your position is very important. It's a key factor which will determine the future of the world. Okay, India, okay, many other countries, rising countries, plus Turkey, a regional country. We are not happy about the world is being ruled by the United Nations Security Council. There's a ruling elite there, and we are all excluded from this ruling elite. We are unhappy. We are criticizing this insufficient structure of the United Nations. But at the same time, I think regarding the position of Ukraine, there is an unjust war going on there. There's a humanitarian crisis, and there's an illegal invasion of Russia. So you might have different reasons. We as Turkey might have different reasons, but we all should first of all say Russia loudly that it is doing something wrong in Ukraine. Because otherwise, either it's Russia or some other countries, maybe China next, your very close rival, somebody else might choose to act in the same way, illegally, unlawfully. So this will become a kind of practice of fait accompli invasions and acts everywhere, all around the world, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally with you on this. I mean, you know, but can I go to Marcus for a minute, please? Marcus Papadopoulos is joining us from London. You know, we can talk about India, but inevitably the discussion also becomes, and I'd like to get in Ms. Bonikowska's views also from Poland. But first to you, Marcus, this discussion becomes, every discussion on Ukraine, every single discussion, within 10 minutes becomes a discussion on ironing out all the wrinkles of American foreign policy in the past. And what Dr. Helene has said right now from Istanbul is another expression in that direction. You know, they're saying, yes, there is a humanitarian crisis, but there are loud complaints with the sheer unilateralism of the American bloc and the way it's run the world or tried to run the world. And people are seeing in this, Dr. Marcus, they're seeing an incredible opportunity to correct past mistakes. And I think America should welcome that, because we will be a more equitable world as a result. What do you think, Dr. Marcus?
Well, I would like to highlight some striking falsehoods and omissions which I have heard so far in this debate. Firstly, it is true, of course, that Ukraine, Kazakhstan and Belarus inherited a sizable part of the Soviet Union's nuclear arsenal. However, neither Ukraine nor Kazakhstan nor Belarus would have been able to use those nuclear weapons because the codes were in Moscow. Secondly, when NATO carried out its 78-day criminal and savage air campaign against Serbia, NATO dropped depleted uranium on Serbia, causing an enormous increase in cancer rates amongst the Serbian population. Then we have how NATO exceeded its mandate in Libya to the extent that NATO turned Libya into a failed state, so much so that there are human slave markets today in existence in Tripoli. Then we have America and Britain's war against the people of Yemen, in which American and British weapons used by the Saudis have caused the deaths of over 200,000 Yemeni men, women and children, which constitutes the greatest humanitarian crisis that the world has seen in contemporary times. There has been no mention made to the savage nature of the American ruling elite in Serbia or in Libya or in Yemen. Now, turning to India, India is feeling the effects from America of pursuing an independent foreign policy and by putting India and the Indian people first. I commend the Indian government's stance on the conflict in Ukraine, because the Indian government understands very well that the West is not genuinely committed to democracy or human rights or the international law. The West cares nothing for the population of Ukraine. To the West, Ukraine is a tool to use against Russia. All that we have seen from America and, of course, Britain in the last 5 weeks, ever since the commencement of the Russian military campaign in Ukraine, is all about preserving and enhancing Western global supremacy. The Americans had been looking for an opportunity for many years now to destroy Russia's status as a superpower. And the Americans are using all means at their disposal, with the exception, of course, of their own military and their own nuclear means, to asphyxiate the Russian economy in the hope that that will destroy the Russian state and return Russia to how it was in the 1990s, namely a pauper state in which America ruled the world supreme without any challenges. I only wish countries in Europe, such as Germany and Greece, would take a leaf out of the book of the Indian government and not participate in what is a Western crusade against Russia, and put the people of Germany and Greece and other peoples in Europe first.
Okay. I'd like to commend you for your straightforward views, but I want to say one thing, Marcus, Dr. Marcus, you missed one point which I'd like to expand on. I mean, the worst perpetrators of human rights violations in the world. The most gross, the most unacceptable savagery that happens on people anywhere in the world has happened under American watch and with American approval and using American weapons and American money and American trade and support. I mean, not one word about public decapitations that happened in Saudi Arabia. Not one word. Look at what has happened to anyone in Saudi Arabia. Ask anyone what happens in Riyadh. How women are flogged there. Ask anyone there how the Americans, you're so right there. And I think the Americans need to hear this tonight. Ask them how the Shias live in Saudi Arabia. What happens to them out there? The manner in which they're conditioned, the ghettos in which they live, the savagery that happens upon them. And the Americans, when they speak about, human rights violations, it's laughable. So I think it's the world that's beginning to speak out. I'd like to go to Malgorzata Monikowska, because I haven't kept it away for too long. What do you make of the discussion? We start by talking about India, and then a number of people eventually are pointing straightforward fingers. And people are saying, yes, we are sorry for the people of Ukraine. We are with the people of Ukraine. We don't agree with Putin's methods, but please, for God's sake, look at the bigger picture and look upon America's role in precipitating situations like these. Yes, please, Ms. Monikowska, please. Thank you.
Look, thank you for the fascinating discussion, but I think, we are so many in this room, so many people in this program, but I wonder if we can agree, all of us, at least at one thing, because we can discuss everything in this program. We can continue like this until morning. But the key element of this discussion is about that Russia invaded Ukraine. That's a war in Europe, and we know very well who attacked whom, and we want to stop it. It's as simple as that, period. We can discuss the history, we can discuss all mistakes the West has taken, but now let's focus all on this war. Now, if we can agree to that, then let's think about what can we do. No one likes sanctions. Do you think Europe is happy about sanctions against Russia? No. Do you think the US is happy that all this is happening? I don't think so. And countries like Poland, we are a frontline state now. We are just neighbor country to Ukraine, to Russia as well. Do you think we are happy about this situation as a member of NATO or as a member of the European Union? Not at all. We are the first country interested in having great relations with Russia. It's our neighbor. But how can you do it if this country threatens another country? If this country invades an independent state like Ukraine, even more, This country in 1994 guaranteed the territorial integrity of Ukraine, together with the US and UK, by the way, because everyone wanted the nuclear weapons to be given up. This was a mistake of Ukraine, because if Ukraine had these weapons today, it would have been a different discussion and different situation. So the real point is here how to solve this particular war and what to do in a larger sense to be able to survive on this planet. Because if we mention the Third World War, this is something any one of us want to face. Do we? I mean, that's incredibly important point we've made.
Sure.
If we want to avoid it, we are 200 countries on Earth, 195 countries in the UN. Are we able to survive on this planet? Are we able to resolve these kind of problems or not? And this is the role of India. And I would stress it. European Union counts on India, counts on Indian wisdom to be able, because you have position to also as a neutral country to step down and discuss it and help us really to not to put the things upside down,
as a neutral
but
country,
to just face the truth.
Ma'am, as one from a neutral country, can I ask a short question? Does the survival of the world depend on expansion of NATO to the east? Is it an imperative? And if that's not an imperative, then the war could have been avoided.
Is this the question to me?
Yes.
It's a completely all on the other side, because you put the question upside down. NATO did not expand. There are countries like Poland, my country. I can tell you from my own experience and my own memories. We wanted to go and be member of NATO. Why?
NATO was 16 countries.
I think it was a fantastic question there. You see, the point is also, was it a if you look at what started this, it was this sort of the sheer manner in which NATO or the America was seen to be wooing Ukraine. I mean, I think the question is there. The answer was, we don't need to be an existential threat across the world because the NATO was trying to woo Ukraine. And if that matter is over, it's over. I think a lot of mistakes have been made, but Abhijit has not spoken. Abhijit, British Foreign Secretary, Foreign Minister of Russia, all are in India, right? And my own view, Abhijit, is that a more flat world, a more equal world is a better world. I think we can use the opportunity to work in that direction. What do you think?
I think the Indian view here is very clear that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is illegal. The point is, we also believe that the bombing of Bosnia, the separation of Kosovo, the completely illegal invasion of Iraq, dressing up, preventive war as preemptive war, the overshooting of the mandate in Libya, the deliberate attempts at breeding Al-Qaeda and ISIS and referring to them as moderate rebels in Syria, and then accusing Russia of aggression when it goes in to stabilize the situation. America has done more to destroy international peace and what is international law? International law is ultimately built up through jurisprudence and through constant repetition. America has destroyed it so comprehensively today. The problem is Ukraine is not the red line. That red line was there in 1995. It was there in 97. It was there in 2003. It was there in 2011. And all these people who are talking down to us went along with it. Most of them, I bet you take half the participants on this screen today, they would have all participated in the illegal invasion of Iraq. What was that? So I'm sorry, I'm just not willing to accept that Russia needs to be singled out for doing what you people have been doing all this while, number one. Number two, Arnab, very specifically, we need to understand that the Biden administration is a deeply dysfunctional administration. Unlike previous presidential administrations that knew where to take orders from, this one seems to have siloized into several. It's siloized into several power factions. They are all gaffe prone. I think one of our guests very clearly said that if Dalip Singh had the opportunity, he would walk back his comments. The third point here is one of reciprocity. All this outrage. Remember what Russia has done to Ukraine, using an ethnocentric ground to go invade and grab land, is exactly what Pakistan did to us. Where were all these people then? Even today, Arnab,
very well put.
Today, Liz Truss, the UK Foreign Secretary, was repeatedly pushed by a journalist to say that Pakistan sponsored terrorism against India. She refused to say it. She was asked on 3 different occasions. So
that's the irony. That's the sweet irony, isn't
extraordinarily
it?
Racist.
Amazing.
I'm sorry, Arnab. How could you even tolerate that kind of racism, calling Russian barbarians? This is when Ukrainians, not a single image in the Western press
you see, I don't,
has been shorn of Nazi imagery. The Ukrainian parliament, let me one second.
I think the West is overdoing it.
The Ukrainian parliament has tweeted out rubbish about Nazis, calling them national heroes. Ivan Mazepa, Simon Pelitura, Stepan Bandera, Roman Shushkevich. Roman Shushkevich, who killed 100,000 Poles. These people were SS officers. There is not one image of a Ukrainian that doesn't have a Nazi
I tell you, Abhijit,
so, this is their
because I'm running short of time, I just say one thing at the end. I think we've had a lot of panelists, so yes, I haven't been able to give each other individual time, but the important thing is everyone listen to each other. And on my program, what I do is I get 7 to 8 global capitals and centers on a discussion like this very often. My own understanding of this is you have to introduce multilateralism in spirit in the UN Security Council and across the world. Parity is the only way in the future. We're not going to be in anyone's corner. One last piece of breaking news. Putin says from April 1st, that's tomorrow, you want gas, you pay in rubles. Ruble for gas is the deadline, April 1st for payments from tomorrow. He's pushing it. European countries have to decide. If they want gas, they pay in rubles. This is economic brinkmanship at a new level. We're tracking the story closely here on Republic. And see you tomorrow, same time, 9 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. Till then, good night and goodbye.